From Pacifica, this is Democracy Now!
It's an incredible violation of human rights, but there it is. We must face it, and we're going to do whatever is necessary so that we can find out quickly the effect on people, because what we're interested in is the victims.
The Guatemalan president, Álvaro Colom, calls it a crime against humanity. In the 1940s, the U.S. government deliberately infected nearly 700 Guatemalans with syphilis and gonorrhea. The doctor who did it was also involved in the Tuskegee experiments, when government researchers deliberately withheld medical treatment from hundreds of African-American men in Tuskegee suffering from syphilis, despite misleading them to believe they were receiving care. We'll talk to the medical historian who discovered the Guatemalan experiments and is an expert on Tuskegee, Wellesley College professor Susan Reverby. All that and more coming up. Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. A U.S. drone strike in Pakistan has killed at least 8 German citizens suspected of being linked to Pakistani militants. The identities of the German men have not been released. The attack came one day after the U.S. issued a travel alert about potential terrorist attacks in Europe. The CIA has sharply increased its use of drones to carry out strikes inside Pakistan in recent weeks. Monday's attack was the 26th drone strike in the past 37 days. In other news from Pakistan, aid workers are predicting as many as 2 million Pakistanis will be infected with malaria in coming months due to the devastating floods. The World Health Organization estimates 250,000 Pakistanis are believed to have already been infected. The Supreme Court started its new term Monday, and for the first time, the court has 3 female justices, with Elena Kagan joining Justices Sonia Sotomayor and Ruth Bader Ginsburg on the bench. Kagan has recused herself from nearly half the court's 51 scheduled cases because she played a role in the litigation while serving as U.S. Solicitor General. In one of its first decisions, the court refused Monday to hear a lawsuit filed by a group of attorneys seeking to learn whether the National Security Agency had tapped their phones because they represent prisoners at Guantanamo. Monday's session of the Supreme Court also marked the first time in almost 35 years that the court was without Justice John Paul Stevens, who retired earlier this year. On Monday, NPR News aired an interview with the 90-year-old Stevens, who said he regrets only one vote he made on the Supreme Court, his decision in 1976 to uphold the death penalty. He now describes the decision as incorrect.
I voted to uphold the death penalty, and I thought at the time that if the universe of defendants eligible for the death penalty is sufficiently narrow so that you can be confident that the defendant really merits that severe punishment, that the death penalty was appropriate. But what happened over the years is the court constantly expanded the cases eligible for the death penalty so that the underlying premise for my vote in those cases has disappeared, in a sense.
The Washington Post reports special interest groups have spent $80 million on the November congressional elections, more than 5 times as much as they did during the 2006 midterm. The increased spending is due in part because the Supreme Court cleared the way for unlimited spending by corporations, unions, and other interest groups on election ads earlier this year in its decision in the Citizens United case. The bulk of the money is being spent by conservatives who have swamped their Democratic-aligned competition by a 7-to-1 margin in recent weeks. One of the biggest spenders nationwide is a little-known Iowa group called the American Future Fund, which has spent $7 million on behalf of Republicans in more than 24 House and Senate races. In campaign news, the comedian Bill Maher is threatening to continue to release archival footage of Republican senatorial candidate Christine O'Donnell of Delaware until she agrees to appear on his HBO program. During the 90s, O'Donnell was a regular on Maher's show Politically Incorrect. Maher recently rehashed a clip of O'Donnell from 1999 when she admitted she had dabbled in witchcraft.
You were a witch.
I dabbled into witchcraft. I never joined a coven.
Wait a minute, you were a witch?
Yeah, she was. I was a witch.
I mean, wait a minute.
That's exactly why.
How are you to be a witch?
Because I dabbled into witchcraft. I hung around people who were doing these things.
Having fun?
I'm not making this stuff up. I know what they told me they do.
Well, what they do?
I mean, in one of my dates, my first date was...
Wait, I want to hear about this.
One of my first dates with the witch was on a satanic altar, and I didn't know it. And, I mean, there's little blood there and stuff like that.
That was a date? Your first date was a satanic altar?
Yeah, we went to a movie and then, like, had a little midnight picnic.
Let's have a movie and a sacrifice?
Christine O'Donnell is now a Tea Party favorite who's trying to secure the conservative and religious vote in Delaware. Her witch comments have created such a stir that she decided to address the controversy in her first campaign TV ad released Monday.
I'm not a witch. I'm nothing you've heard. I'm you. None of us are perfect, but none of us can be happy with what we see all around us. Politicians who think spending, trading favors, and backroom deals are the ways to stay in office. I'll go to Washington and do what you'd do. I'm Christine O'Donnell, and I approve this message. I'm you.
In other political news, legal questions are being raised in Chicago over Rahm Emanuel's run for mayor to replace Richard Daley. Two of Chicago's top election lawyers say President Obama's former chief of staff is not eligible to run because of a requirement in Illinois that a candidate for mayor must reside in the town for a year before the election. Emanuel and his family have been living in Washington since 2009. In his first campaign video, Emanuel says he's glad to be home.
Hi, I'm Rahm Emanuel. My father came to Chicago as an immigrant from Israel. I was born here, and my wife Amy and I raised our 3 children here. I spent 6 years in Congress representing Chicago. Then President Obama asked me to serve as his chief of staff. It was a great honor to work for him, but I'm glad to be home.
The video might give viewers the impression Rahm Emanuel was glad to be back at his home in Chicago, but the website Politico has revealed the video was actually filmed in Washington, D.C. in the offices of AKPD Message and Media, the firm founded by David Axelrod. In Tennessee, a local fire department refused to put out a house fire last week because the homeowner had forgotten to pay $75 for fire protection from a nearby town. The firefighters showed up to the scene of the fire, then watched as the home of Gene Cranick burned to the ground. Cranick's neighbors had paid the $75 fee, so when the fire spread across the property line, firefighters took action, but only to save the neighbor's property. The local mayor defended the actions of the firefighters. South Fulton Mayor David Crocker said, quote, "Anybody that's not in the city of South Fulton, it's a service we offer. Either they accept it or they don't." On Monday, Gene Cranick appeared on Countdown with Keith Olbermann.
Everything that we possessed was lost in the fire. Even 3 dogs and a cat that belonged to my grandchildren was lost in it. And they could have been saved if they had been put water on it, but they didn't do it, so that's just a loss.
When you all called 911, as I understand it, you told the operator you'd pay whatever was necessary to have the firefighters come out and prevent the fire from spreading to your house. What was their response?
That we wasn't on their list.
New reports by the ACLU and the Brennan Center for Justice have found a sharp rise in debtor prisons across the country. Poor defendants are being jailed for failing to pay legal debts. In Ohio, a man named Howard Webb, who earns $7 an hour as a dishwasher, has served 2 stints in jail, totaling over 300 days for being unable to pay nearly $3,000 in fines and costs from various criminal and traffic cases. In Michigan, a 25-year-old single mother named Kawana Young has been jailed 5 times for being unable to afford to pay a few minor traffic tickets. Eric Balaban of the ACLU said, quote, "Incarcerating people simply because they cannot afford to pay their legal debts is not only unconstitutional, but also has a devastating impact on men and women whose only crime is that they're poor." The Israeli military has ordered an investigation into a video uploaded to YouTube that apparently shows an Israeli soldier belly dancing beside a bound and handcuffed Palestinian woman. On the video, you can hear the soldier dancing to music and occasional cheers from his fellow soldiers who are documenting the dance. It's not known yet when or where the video was shot. It was uploaded on YouTube over the weekend and